What's up, everyone? Today I am reviewing R.L. Stine's They Call Me Creature. This book is from the Nightmare Room series, and I was buddy reading this with my good friend Juan over at Plagued by Visions. I'll link his channel down below. I highly recommend going and checking out his channel. I believe he'll be doing an individual review of this also. So, yeah, let's jump into the review of this one. Actually, I want to mention real quick, as you guys can probably see, there's a big, chop off corner here of the book. And I ordered this from Thrift Books some time ago, and I sent an email back to them and complained about it. And they sent me another copy of this book that also had a cut off corner almost identical to this one. I have no idea why they would do that. Thrift Books is not the best when it comes to that kind of thing and being truthful as to the conditions of their books. And they basically just sent me the same book for a replacement copy. But yeah, whatever. It's not in too bad of shape other than that corner there. The binding is pretty decent, and there's not like any writing or anything, so I guess I can't complain too much. But I would like to get another copy eventually that has the entire cover intact. But anyway, let's jump into the review of this one. So this is the second Nightmare Room book I've read in recent times. I read a few of these when I was younger. Don't really remember them a whole lot. I believe I may have read this one too when I was younger, but I don't really remember for sure. But these books are structurally and stylistically speaking very similar to Goosebumps. They're written in a very similar fashion, about the same length, about the same target audience too. I would say, although these books, from what I've noticed so far, are a bit more mature and daring, and R.L. Stine is a little bit more gutsy with these Nightmare Room books that I've noticed, and this one just confirms that even further. I will say right off the bat, this is one of the most violent and gory Goosebumps type books or children's horror books from R.L. Stine that I've read of all time. Like this one, if I were making like a top 10 list of the most disturbing or like violent Goosebumps and Nightmare Room and all these types of books, the top 10, this would be somewhere in that list. So yeah, the Nightmare Room, They Call Me Creature. The last one I read was Full Moon Halloween in the Nightmare Room series, and that one was pretty good, but I think I like this one a little bit more, to be honest. This one is a pretty wild story. So in this book, Laura, our main character, is living out in the woods, kind of in the middle of nowhere. She and her dad are living alone together. Her parents are divorced, and they basically have like a huge forest behind their house. And she likes to go out in the woods. She spends a lot of time there. She doesn't really have too many friends, and she's kind of an introverted character. And she likes to go out in the woods and study the wildlife and take photographs and things of that nature. And I kind of relate to the character in that way. I really like that about her because I've always been a bit passionate about wildlife and nature myself. I like being outdoors and learning about animals and things like that. So I kind of liked that Laura kind of has those traits. It makes her character a little bit relatable. And she's also struggling with some personal issues, some relationship type issues. Her and her dad's relationship is a bit strained, and her dad is a bit like distant and doesn't always treat Laura the best, I guess. He's not exactly the nicest person in the world. And the issue of their divorce is like touched on a little bit. And yeah, it just adds a little bit like of an emotional depth to this story, and that's not something we see too often in these types of books. There have been a few Goosebumps books where the main character's parents are divorced, and it briefly talks about like their relationships and whatnot, but usually it's not something that's gone very much in depth. And here it's not very like super deep either, but it's there, and it does add a little bit of emotional depth to the story. And without getting into spoilers too much, her dad is kind of a jerk at certain points in here, and she almost is dealing with like the rejection of both of her parents. It just seems like she's all alone. She has no friends. Her parents don't really seem to care about her. And yeah, it just adds another layer to the story that's very interesting. Makes the story kind of heavy almost and emotional. And I really appreciated that about this book. And I think that's kind of why she resorts to finding like friends and finding comfort in wildlife. She likes to go out in the woods and explore and see all these different animals and things, because she just doesn't have really any close friends or anyone she feels like she can talk to. So as she's exploring the woods one day, and this happens pretty early on in the story, she discovers this kid. I believe his name is Joe, and they're about the same age, and it describes how she thinks he's kind of cute and she has a crush on him and things like that. And that is also somewhat of a common theme in these types of books. There's like kind of some references to some romantic interest, but it's never gone too far into, again, for the sake of it being a kid's book. But here, this one goes just a little bit further with it, like one step further. There's some more direct references to romantic interest, especially with one of the other main characters' friends. They talk about like boys a little bit and stuff, and then also about her dad's relationship, or at one time he had a relationship with this other woman in the story. So it does take things a little bit further, but it's still fairly age appropriate, I would say. Again, another just little interesting layer with this book. But this kid is kind of strange. He doesn't really know much about him. They slowly become friends and like hang out in the woods and things like that. And as the story progresses, there's not a ton going on right away. Her dad just slowly starts acting more strange and becomes distant. He's not very friendly, not talking to Laura as much. He's always locked up in his room or in his shed outside where he has like this laboratory. Her dad was an ex-veterinarian, by the way. He worked at an animal hospital and he quit. And he's basically just locked up, just doing his own thing, doing some kind of experiments that he won't tell Laura what they are. And this kind of gives the book a little bit of a stay out of the basement vibe. If you've read that book from the original Goosebumps series, you'll know what I'm talking about. That one is very much similar to kind of what's going on in here. The dad is just kind of hidden away, performing some like illegal, like mysterious experiments that they won't reveal to their kids what they're doing, and they just want to be left alone, basically. So the story kind of revolves around the mystery of what's going on with her dad. Why is he being a jerk? Why doesn't he want Laura to know what he's doing? And then also there's a little bit of a mystery revolving this new friend of hers, Joe, what he's up to, where he lives, and why she only ever encounters him in the woods, things like that. And there's some other stuff that happens too in the story. There's actually quite a few different characters in this book that all kind of relate to this mystery element. And it kind of has you guessing like what's going on exactly. Even a more seasoned reader like myself of these types of books, even I was a little bit unsure exactly what direction things were going in here. I was a little bit confused. Yeah, it kind of had me guessing a little bit. I didn't predict the ending on this one. It's very common for me to easily predict the endings of a lot of these types of books, but here I wasn't entirely sure. So props to this book for doing that. And yeah, the mystery just kind of increases. Some other stuff kind of keeps happening. A lot of the story takes place in the woods. She encounters some strange animals. I won't talk too much more about the plot and get into spoilers or anything like that. But this was a really good book. This is honestly, from what I remember, I haven't read too many of the Nightmare Room books in recent times, like I said, but I think this is my favorite Nightmare Room book so far. And like I said, this one is also pretty shocking. There's some very gory stuff in here that I was not expecting at all for a children's horror book. There's been some Goosebumps books in the past that have surprised me a little bit with how edgy they get in terms of violence and descriptions of blood and things like that. And again, this one takes things just one step further and has some pretty disgusting stuff in it that I feel like would scare the crap out of a 10-year-old kid if they were reading this. Maybe not every 10-year-old kid, but I feel like this book would be a little bit on the more mature side for the younger audience. But yeah, this was a good book. Not everything in here worked for me. The ending and the climax, it felt a little bit rushed, and I'm not sure that it all made sense perfectly. Not everything gets resolved exactly how I wanted it to. Now, I can't deduct too many points for that. It is common for these types of books to leave some loose ends and to have some logical inconsistencies with the story. And this one's not terrible. It doesn't leave like any huge glaring plot holes or anything like that. And it is a little bit hard to talk about it too without spoiling anything, but just to give a quick example, without being super specific, there's certain actions and dialogue that takes place in here by certain characters earlier in the story, and it's there to keep you guessing, to create tension and conflict and keep you guessing what exactly is going on. Why are these characters behaving this way, and why are they so sharp and like just getting angry easily and things like that. And it's there to just kind of keep the tension building and keep you wondering what's going on. And it does work fairly well. But by the time we get to the climax of the story and then the big twist and reveal and all of that, looking back, I'm not sure all of it made perfect sense. It kind of has me wondering, was it necessary for them to have acted that way all along? Like, it felt a little bit forced in a certain sense. Like I said, it's not terrible. There's a lot of these books, Goosebumps books and Nightmare Room books, where the twists and big reveals and stuff are very, very forced and leave a lot of loose ends and are just there for the sake of being there. It's kind of a landmark or a trademark for these types of books, where there's just a twist there for the sake of it being there. And yeah, it doesn't always make sense. And this one, it just leaves a few loose ends that kind of bother me, but it wasn't enough to like ruin the story or anything like that. So that's just something to keep in mind. It's just a few minor issues I had with it. And I don't know if I was necessarily the biggest fan of the actual twist and what happens at the end. But again, it wasn't too terrible, and it didn't ruin my overall enjoyment with the book. But I will say that the parts of this book that I did enjoy the most were the more shocking moments involving some violence that I was not expecting. And I like the different layers to the story and just the mystery going on. It's a bit different here. This is not just a retread of ideas of something R.L. Stine has done before. It does feel a little bit like Stay Out of the Basement. Like I said, it has some elements from Stay Out of the Basement from the original Goosebumps series, and also some elements from Werewolf of Fever Swamp for the original series. It almost feels like a little bit of a crossover between those two books. But there's also a lot of new stuff going on in here that keeps the book feeling really fresh. And yeah, like I said, I'm definitely curious to check out more of the Nightmare Room books now, after seeing how these ones just have kind of a different feel than Goosebumps, even though structurally speaking, they're pretty much the same. I believe the target audience is pretty much the same thing. But they do have just a different feel, different atmosphere to them than Goosebumps books. And yeah, I had a good time with this book. Overall, I would say I'd probably rate this book a 3.5 out of 5 stars, which is a pretty good rating. I really like this one. My complaints with it are minor. I just didn't quite love it or anything. It's not one of my all-time, not even close to being one of my all-time favorite R.L. Stine books. But it does have a lot going for it. Very enjoyable. A bit shocking in its violence. It has some emotional stuff going on in here. And the characters are all pretty decent too. The characters are never outstanding or very layered in R.L. Stine's writing. But they're all pretty good in here, So yeah, I don't know. That's about all I have to say for They Call Me Creature. I'm sure there was something else I wanted to say about this book that I forgot to mention because, again, this is one you could analyze a little bit. I've said this before in some of my reviews of R.L. Stine's books. Occasionally you find one where there's a little bit more substance to it and you can take the time to go through and kind of analyze it a little bit. And this is one of those, I think. But yeah, that's pretty much what I have to say for They Call Me Creature. I recommend giving this one a read. This was a pretty solid book overall. It has a few minor flaws, but nothing major. And yeah, what did you guys think about this book? Have you read this one? Let me know down in the comments what your thoughts are of They Call Me Creature, or just R.L. Stine's The Nightmare Room series in general. I will probably be reading more of these books in the future and doing reviews of them. So yeah, guys, that's about it. Thanks for watching and have a great day.